One lane's closed westbound from junction 2 to 3 near Wolverhampton. A car's caught fire. And in Berkshire on the M4 westbound, the outside lane's blocked off from junction 8 to 10. That's the Maidenhead Bracknell stretch following a collision. That's causing long queues on surrounding routes. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. As ever, it's Donald Trump-related stories that are dominating the news. Tonight we'll discuss Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership, maybe 1 or 2 question marks around the great war hero. We'll talk about Trump's latest pronouncement on what will happen to Hamas if they don't surrender the hostages, both alive and dead. The 2-tier justice row from yesterday is raging, with, for once, it seems actually quite a lot of common ground between the Conservatives and the Labour Party. And, as you know, 5.5 million of you have had your votes cancelled on the 1st of May. We'll discuss whether that makes any sense at all and whether these new super councils will actually save the taxpayer money. But before all of that, let's get the news with Katie Bowen.
Nigel, thank you and good evening. It's 1 minute past 7. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. GB News understands this evening that 20 countries are in talks about joining a coalition of the willing to keep the peace in Ukraine. It was announced earlier today that the UK government has signed a £30 million deal to provide Ukraine's armed forces with more advanced attack drones to tackle Russian aggression in the Black Sea. Sir Keir Starmer said the UK will play a leading part in terms of defence and security. Posting on X after that EU leaders summit in Brussels, President Zelenskyy said that, quote, everyone must ensure that Russia, the sole source of this war, accepts the need to end it. He went on to add that the next step is basic trust in the circumstances in which the negotiations are taking place. The Prime Minister spoke to GB News' Catherine Forster a short time ago.
We've enjoyed 80 years of peace, and we've enjoyed 80 years of peace because we've had such a close relationship with the United States. We are closer than any other country to the United States when it comes to our defence, our security, our intelligence sharing, and we've worked with our European partners within NATO, which is the most important alliance the world has ever seen. And we've never made that choice between siding, as it were, with the US or with Europe. Historically, we've never done that. Churchill didn't do it, Attlee didn't do it, and it's certainly not the right thing to do now when things are extremely volatile.
Well, that comes as Defence Secretary John Healey has met with his US counterpart Pete Hegseth a short time ago. Earlier on, the White House said that they had made no decision at this time on the legal status for Ukrainians in the US. The Trump administration confirmed that they had stopped intelligence sharing with Ukraine last night. Triple killer Kyle Clifford has been found guilty at Cambridge Crown Court of raping his ex-partner Louise Hunt in an attack which saw him murder her and her sister with a crossbow and their mother with a butcher's knife. The 26-year-old was found guilty by a jury at Cambridge Crown Court after around 45 minutes. Clifford had previously denied rape. He previously admitted murdering Louise, Hannah and Carol Hunt at their home in Bushey in July last year. Clifford was tried in his absence after refusing to leave his cell at HMP Belmarsh. And the Prince of Wales has spoken in detail for the first time today about his first session as a crisis helpline volunteer for young people, describing the experience as terrifying. Prince William made the comments on a visit to mental health innovations in West London, adding that the conversations he had while volunteering in 2020 have, quote, lived with me for a long time afterwards. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Nigel.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, of course, negotiations continuing about ending the Russian-Ukraine war. They've been going on today in Brussels with European leaders and indeed with the Ukrainian leader. As you might have just seen on the news, our Defence Secretary off meeting his counterpart in America. And potentially next week, a big get-together in the White House, perhaps even the French, British, Ukrainian and American leaders being together in one room. Most people in this country, and I include in that most politicians and most of our mainstream media, and I think most public opinion, thinks that Zelenskyy has been a very brave wartime leader. And last night we had somebody on the programme very much in his favour. But there are one or two questions. Is it possible that he could be a barrier to the peace process? Is it time the Ukrainians had elections? And remember, this is GB News, where we debate absolutely everything. I'm joined in the studio by Alexander Temerko, Ukrainian-British businessman and political campaigner. I'm joined by Sir John Redwood, former Conservative MP and Minister, and Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor and columnist. Alexander, welcome back on to GB News. You wrote a big article yesterday in which you asked some questions about the leadership of Zelenskyy and, of course, you know, what happened in the Oval Office at the end of last week. And your view was that Zelenskyy had displayed poor diplomatic behaviour.
I was witnesses there because in this dramatic situation I was in Washington. I can see in this my eyes what happened there. I think it was very predictable because Zelenskyy, my opinion, Zelenskyy doesn't want to sign a trade deal agreement, I can say, without strong guarantee, military guarantee for protect Ukraine after ceasefire. That why he wanted to visit in America and wanted to ask President Trump and discuss with him how we can protect Ukraine after ceasefire and what can be after we signed a great peaceful deal. That is, and Trump has another vision. He's need a signed trade deal with Ukraine, and which include a lot of Ukrainian resources, rare minerals, strategic resources, reservoirs, bridges, a lot of everything, ports. That is a quite complex paper. But you know, I know just a bit Trump for his style of negotiation. He's a probably business style negotiation. But Zelenskyy a bit doesn't understand this style of negotiation because Trump knows Putin better than Zelenskyy knows Putin. Because Trump and longer. And Trump want to say, Putin, listen, I have agreement with Ukraine.
Yeah.
1 trillion, half a trillion, but doesn't matter. That is bigger than your budget. and that is a mine. And actually, I have an idea to grow in business across Ukraine. And we need to negotiate situation, and I need a peace, I need a ceasefire. That is a key point what Trump want to say Putin. That is a piece of paper needed Trump to start negotiation with Putin.
You're saying that Zelensky went in there not understanding the way Trump operates. Fine, I get that. But it does, a lot of people would say this, that there's a lot of pressure being put by the Americans on Zelensky. What pressure is he putting on Putin?
Listen, people doesn't know what kind of negotiation between Trump and Putin must be going to in the future. Actually, if we return to this deal, a trade deal, I'll be very appreciate Trump and say 1,000 times thank you for you are big businessman, global businessman, a leader of the biggest country, want to be promoter my economy, my country, my peace. Nobody cannot promote Ukraine more today than Trump with this deal. Nobody talk about Ukraine resources, Ukraine economy on the so top level like I do the Trump. I believe for that is an achievement. But Zelensky has another agenda, and his agenda talk about next step. What happened when we signed peace agreement.
So is this minerals agreement? And I agree with you, economically, it's going to be great for Ukraine. There's no question about that. Great for American companies as well.
Absolutely.
I understand all of that. Do you see this as the first step towards the kind of security guarantees that Ukraine needs?
Absolutely. And he said, we never leave Ukraine if we will be there, if our economy will be in Ukraine. And he say, there's for my understanding, Trump plan, at a 3 level. First, ceasefire. Second, election. And then new government, a new president signed new peaceful agreement.
So you think the election should happen sort of immediately after a ceasefire, do you?
Absolutely. And then Zelensky is a bit tricky talk for, impossible to provide a proper democratic election in the war. It's true. But we are talking about ceasefire. And then during the almost 1 year, which given this Ukraine to prepare election. And we receive very serious research from Ukraine Parliament and Ukraine legal, one of the biggest legal company, who can say and explain how can do that. It's from Ukraine company. It's inside Ukraine.
You sound to me like you're quite optimistic that an end of the war is coming.
Absolutely optimistic.
But that means, of course, accepting that Crimea is not coming back.
Well, I'm Ukrainian. I was born in Ukraine. For me, it's very difficult.
Yes,
I believe for that is a land of Ukraine. I believe for... I can say what I believe maybe first time. Ukraine need to work with Russian opposition, very close to Russian opposition. Because Putin is not internal. He's not immortal. He's immortal, like any man. And when he died, or will believe the political landscape, opposition come to there. And then the opposition return Ukraine what Putin seized from Ukraine and was occupied. Ukraine need not say for every Russian that is a bad person. Ukraine, it's an absolutely wrong strategy because Russian opposition has an enemy, is a Putin. And Zelensky and all Ukraine has the same enemy. It's a Putin because he is aggressor, is absolutely aggressor. And they need to work much more closer with Russian opposition and believe for without blood, without war, Russian opposition in 10 years return everything to Ukraine. And my vision. So,
John, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, here is somebody saying, actually, this minerals agreement is a really good deal and a very good start. Is that where you come from on this?
Well, I hope it is, but of course none of us has had the advantage of actually reading it. As I understand it, there were several changes to it because the Ukrainian side didn't think it was a fair deal to start with and amendments were made. I think it was a tragedy for everyone involved that the Oval Office meeting went so wrong, and I think you're right. I think Ukraine thought it was another opportunity to improve the deal by adding security guarantees, whereas Trump had briefed the press beforehand that we'd all seen that there wasn't going to be any renegotiation of security guarantees. So it was a bad misunderstanding, and Ukraine has now had to take several steps back and alter their position in the Trump direction in a very public way, which isn't very helpful to the whole situation because you want to show Ukraine is strong at the time when you're trying to get a peace. I desperately want them to find a peace. And if someone's got a better way of finding it, they haven't yet told us how that's going, going to happen.
I think that's true. I mean, Paul, at least we are talking about, whatever. I mean, I know you're not a Trump fan, but at least we are talking about peace. That is progress of a kind.
Well, it is, but it mustn't be peace at any price at all. I mean, how can you have elections in Ukraine while there are Korean and Russian forces occupying bits of Ukraine? How are you going to organise a vote amongst that population that's in effect occupied? So you can see why there isn't an election going on, just as there wasn't in this country during World War II.
Well, there was actually. Before, I mean, we were still fighting the Japanese when we had an election.
But after VE Day and before VJ Day,
the main reason we didn't have an election during our war is because Labour and Conservatives, who were the main forces in the Parliament, both agreed and they governed the country
together. John, how can you have an election when the Koreans and the Russians are occupying towns in Ukraine? How are you going to organise a vote?
I don't think we should tell the Ukrainians whether to have an election or not, but if they're opposition wants one, that's something they have to address.
You can't have peace
on a technical point. I do understand the point you make. Is there a desire for elections in Ukraine? We just don't know.
I think it's quite possible to arrange proper and democratic election in Ukraine, but that does definitely need to help on the euro, because Ukraine is a population 40 million people, and almost 20 million left Ukraine, and then they go living across the world and support America, European Union, Great Britain, and another country when I live in Ukrainian should be helped with election and open the not only embassy, but because can you imagine 20 million for one day in embassy in the one country?
It's quite difficult,
and impossible. And second, many people on the frontier and need to deliver just election boat to the frontier. Question: what can do Ukrainian who is stay in the occupied territory? That is a vision, and as a united vision across Ukraine, for that people cannot vote. Because we don't know how many people take a Russian passport, how many people reconvert and so on. But that is a quite big amount people as well. But anyway, even peace solution to people will be temporary, leaving the occupied territory. It's not means for 10 years Zelenskyy might be president of Ukraine next 10 years.
But get the ceasefire, take some time, try to establish some degree.
It's very tough time to technical arrange of election. That is not easy.
Right.
That is a real tough process, technical, logistic process. How be...
No, there are no easy answers.
Any vote,
Alexander, thank you for coming in, giving us your perspective. In a moment, we will talk about the Trump real ultimatum that he delivered to Hamas. If you haven't heard the words, they're pretty strong, even by Donald Trump standards.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Why do you want to do this, my friend?
I want to raise awareness about what disabled people can do and try and change some perceptions on what is possible.
So, Craig, what happened to you when you were 18 years old? Because your life changed forever, didn't it, in Afghanistan?
It did, yeah. I was on routine foot patrol, and several feet in front of me was a Commando IED. They triggered it, and, triple amputee. Both legs and only the one hand.
And how did those injuries change your life, Craig?
Yeah, in the worst way possible, you know. Everything I love was taken away from me. Windsurfing taken away, guitar taken away. Couldn't even hug my parents or speak in the first initial few weeks. So it was a complete flip upside down.
I'm wheelchair bound and I have been for 2 years. And I only concentrate on what I can't do. And you're actually coming at this from the opposite way, and you're saying, if you're disabled, these are the things you can do.
I'd say to you, focus on how you can't do those things. So how to actually achieve the things that you're not saying you can do. And if you give it a bit of time and thought, I'm pretty sure you'd achieve it.
Wow. And then what's led you to this challenge now? I mean, travelling 6,000 nautical miles from Mexico to Japan by yourself.
My dad taught me how to sail when I was very young. And that lasted up until I joined the army. When I was injured, the doctors saying, you know, look, sports are pretty much a no-go. My dad refused to take that as a thing. He gave me the details to the Paralympic sailing coach, and then I was in the Paralympic team for a little while. I didn't go to any games, but that reintroduced me to sailing and what was possible in the sailing world.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Middle East has always been pretty close to the top of Donald Trump's foreign affairs agenda. And indeed, during his first term as president, I think the Abraham Accords were an astonishing achievement to get Israel to sign normalization agreements with a variety of Arab states, and where trade started to begin and people holidayed in each other's countries. Absolutely amazing achievements. I would even say that if any other American president had done anything resembling that, close to that, they would have got the Nobel Peace Prize, but not Donald Trump. And I do think that it was Saudi Arabia who were perhaps on the verge of joining those accords that prompted, provoked the October the 7th attacks. I think this was an attempt to break this whole thing up. That's at least my opinion, right or wrong. So bearing that in mind, he cares enormously about that. He talks about Israel being, you know, it's either Britain or Israel that are the top ally of America as Donald Trump sees it. And I'm also going to praise him for now by saying that I think even a couple of days before he took office, I think the fact that he was saying, start releasing these hostages or else, and I think that's why the British hostage, Emily Damari, was released. So this was all looking good. But last night on Truth Social, this all did ratchet up a gear with Donald Trump saying, release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over, capital letters, for you. He went on to say, a beautiful future awaits Gaza, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Well, they're the main points from that Truth Social post that was put out last night. Now, you know, that follows on from statements that were made a couple of weeks ago that basically if people cleared out, they could turn it into the most incredible resort. And I've got to admit, looking at all of this, Paul, I'm a little bit confused as to what the... I mean, I get the Hamas thing. You know, I get the Hamas thing, I get the threat, and it did work first time round, but I'm not quite sure where we're going with all of this.
No, I mean, it is correct to say that Hamas are the biggest obstacle to a two-state solution, which is what a lot of us would seek, a safe Israel alongside a viable Palestinian state of some kind. So that analysis is correct. But this kind of language, so intemperate, so threatening, you know, it's almost sort of mafia-like in terms of the threateningness of it. I don't know if this helps at all, and it's such a delicate situation, and the hostage negotiations are so, you know, fraught with danger that I'm not sure this is going to be all that helpful.
And it's always difficult, isn't it, to take out terrorists who are embedded within civilian populations.
Yeah.
You know, we had that problem in Afghanistan. I think you could argue the British had that problem in the Boer War 120 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a very, very difficult situation.
Well, it is. I just think we need to be reminding ourselves of the horror of an organisation that takes hostages in this way, including, you know, very small babies and very old people and women, and holding them for this long. I mean, it is barbaric, you know, and we've almost become inured to it, I think, because it's just an ongoing story. But, you know, what kind of people do that? But how do you get them out is the question. What's the best way to get those hostages home? And there are still plenty there that do need to come home. And the pressure, diplomatic and otherwise, needs to be kept up on that. That's the most important thing now, is to get those hostages home.
Well, it is. I mean, John, you know, I can sort of see you nodding away when I made my points earlier about the Abraham Accords. Amazing achievement.
Yes.
You know, and Trump the peacemaker.
Yeah.
You know, as Paul says...
It was isolate Iran as the source of the problem, and we've seen how much Iran is the source of the Hamas and Hezbollah problem.
And the Houthis and funding all of it.
Absolutely. It's that ring of fire against the West.
Yeah.
And that was working very well, and it's a tragedy it's all gone the way it has, and the awful Hamas incursion into Israel which started it. I mean, I just hope his threatening words do have a favourable impact, because I want those hostages back. We all want those hostages back. And it is disgraceful and awful in the way that we've all been agreeing.
But the question really, and look, you know, I support Donald Trump. I don't support everything he does. Of course, this language, does this kind of language help?
I've no idea, because we're dealing with people who murder people, and they're not normal people. And then they don't normally obey diplomatic niceties. So I have no particular problem with calling them out in a very unpleasant way if it works. But if it doesn't work, then that's another tragedy.
But on whose behalf is he issuing this death threat? That's what I'd like to know. Is he suggesting that the Americans would do this, or is he just giving licence to the Israelis? Or what does it mean? You know,
well, we've no idea. And are there private conversations going on at the same time? If so, then presumably his interpreter, his representative, will make that a bit clearer, because otherwise Hamas could just shrug and say, well, we don't believe it.
He's also quite good, isn't he, at playing a game of chess with all negotiations, being a couple of moves ahead, and we can't read it. But, Paul, there's a knock-on from all of this to British politics.
You ascribe to him a sort of a subtlety, I think, and a genius that not all of us do. I'm not sure it is a game of chess. I think he just says things out loud.
I think he's often a step or two ahead of where people think he is.
Really?
And you should judge him at the end of a process, not at the beginning, is what I would say. But, I mean, you know, look... You know, even as a Trump friend, I would agree this language
How does that fit into a strategy or a plan, though? I mean, I can't see how that kind of language is.
Right now, I don't know. But there's a knock-on to British politics. And that is that this Labour government, when it comes to Israel, Gaza, has become, shall we say, pretty equivocal in terms of whether it supports the Israeli government, whether it condemns the Israeli government, whether it stops shipments of various arms. And doesn't the Labour Party now have a very big problem that the pro-Gaza vote in many inner cities, northern towns, is now becoming a major electoral problem?
No, I don't think that's a fair analysis at all. I don't think that's right. And if you look at some of the things that John Healey and Starmer and others have said, they are in pursuit of peace. They want a two-state solution, which has always been Labour's policy.
David Lamb is very equivocal on this.
No, I disagree. There's no latitude at all given to the terrorists or to the other Iranian proxies, as John has been describing.
No, I didn't suggest that. What I suggested was that support of Israel has become pretty equivocal.
Well, I was at the Labour Friends of Israel lunch the other day, you know, 100 Labour MPs at it. I mean, there is a lot of support for getting the hostages home, for a safe, secure Israel and for a Palestinian state, and that is the two-state solution. And that was from the mainstream of the Labour Parliamentary Party, and that is the true party's position.
But you see my point about the growth. You know, 4 independents, even under first past the post, won at the last election.
Well,
people like West Streeting crept back by 500 votes. You know, Jess Phillips by 1,500 votes. They've got a problem here.
I think the bigger question about those independencies, though, that I think if it wasn't for Gaza, there'd be some other reason that they'd be battering the Labour Party on this. It's a playbook that sort of is using a global situation. But, I mean, it's not new. It's just something they just keep rolling out.
I don't know.
So I don't think it's really about the Middle East, to be honest.
John Redwood, I think we're beginning to see a form of sectarianism in English politics, people voting along a religious line that we've really never seen before.
Well, there's a danger of that, and I think a good Labour MP has to stand up for legitimate Palestinian concerns and the people who wish to proceed in a more normal way, but they have to be very strong with the rest of us in condemning terrorist acts of the brutal kind we've been seeing.
So do you see the sectarian politics that I'm talking about?
Well, we see it in these sentencing guidelines.
We're about to debate that in a moment.
Because, I mean, you know, if it's now going to be the case that Christians don't get special treatment but other religions do, then that implies that that's the way some people are going in our country.
Well, that's exactly what we'll do. We'll take a break and we'll come back to the sentencing row. And it's becoming, actually, really quite a big row.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
It's an unsettled story across some parts of Western Europe as we go through the next couple of days. There's the risk of some heavy, thundery rain bringing some flooding. There's a system pushing into Portugal, western Spain, and that's bringing some intense rain. Also, some heavy rain already affecting eastern parts of Spain, so further totals building up, causing more issues. More unsettled weather across parts of the Mediterranean, though further east towards Greece it's looking largely dry. Then quite a mixed bag when we head through the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Corton Beach is not a naturist beach. Lewd behaviour will not be tolerated and may be recorded by CCTV and reported to the police.
It says causing an offence to others is a criminal. Causing offence to others is a criminal offence, and all cases will be reported for prosecution. And a spokesman then says we're not targeting or trying to outlaw the naturists. The parish council recognises that naturism in the UK is legal.
So what are they doing then?
Well, let's talk to the organiser to find out. The British Naturism Eastern Regional, Nigel Newman. Shows us now. Morning, Nigel. Sorry, I think it's the first time I've interviewed somebody without their top on. But, you know, right, Nigel, what's going on down there? Because I think we pretty much support your right to be able to, you know, swing free on a nice warm day.
Well, the thing is, Corton Beach in Suffolk is very, very popular and has been since the 1970s for naturists. And one of the reasons for that is right next to a car park with a cafe with toilets, and there's, and this is a bit important, there's a ramp that goes right down to the top of the beach, which is ideal for disabled naturists. And that's one of the reasons that it's so well attended over the years. And what's happened is back in December, this sign appeared, great big yellow sign with black writing saying, warning, as you read out, Corton Beach is not a naturist beach. Well, that's not accurate because every beach is a naturist beach. Naturism is not unlawful. And the sign then goes on to suggest, because it's in the very next sentence, that lewd behaviour will not be tolerated. Well, British naturism totally agree with that statement. Lewd behaviour should not be tolerated. But lewd behaviour and naturism are two completely different things.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter. Just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out. Enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News. Full T's and C's apply.
Well, two-tier justice, two-tier policing, two-tier care. That's what opponents of this government have been saying, and especially, frankly, ever since Southport. But yesterday, it's quite rare to get the front benches really agreeing. But the Sentencing Council put out a report yesterday. Now, you know, what it basically said was that at pre-sentencing, consideration should be given as to whether, for example, a woman is pregnant. But it also suggested that different sentences might be given according to people's ethnicity. Unsurprisingly, Robert Jenrick hit out in the House of Commons yesterday afternoon.
It's completely outrageous and ludicrous, and it needs to stop. And frankly, the Justice Secretary should have known about this before, if indeed she didn't. She has a personal representative on the very Sentencing Council that issued these guidance. I've read the minutes. There was no objection raised whatsoever. The government have got to intervene and stop this, because I don't want a two-tier justice system.
But surprisingly, the Lord Chancellor, Shabana Mahmood, said this, and this was in the House of Commons.
As somebody who's of an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind, and there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch or under this Labour government.
Well, that was a pretty robust response. Now, we have found out since that David Lammy was perhaps one of the people that influenced a few years ago this report, but I tell you what, I'm going to give that a buy. Because I am, and I tell you why, out of fairness, because that was 2017 that David Lammy was involved in this, and we are today where we are. That really was a robust response from the Lord Chancellor.
Well, it really was, and you heard from her own mouth how angry she is. But I mean, the briefing behind the scenes was also that she's incandescent around this, because the Labour Party is obviously vulnerable to this assault of being two-tier justice and all that. And when something like this comes out, but it's not from ministers, is the point, you know. And the question then is, well, where is it coming from? And there is a sort of legalistic blob, a kind of
who actually runs the country,
right? And I think this is a good example of where ministers need to get a grip on this. I think she's somebody who will, especially with the language that you've described there. But it does raise the bigger question. Well, I mean, first of all, this body was set up under the previous Conservative government, so Jenrick's all well and good denouncing it, but it was on his watch that this happened. But there is a question about how politicians come into office, get a grip on the system and actually reflect the public's concerns rather than the sort of the perma class of civil servants.
John, all these bodies, all these organisations, I mean, it feels to me like Blair started it. But 14 years of Conservative government continued it. And advice and... I mean, you know, Liz Truss, for all her faults, did make the point that it often feels that the elected politicians and government suddenly aren't really running things anymore. Is that a fair point?
Yes, it's entirely fair. There are too many of these so-called independent bodies that the taxpayer pays for, the government is meant to control and the state owns, and they do things that ministers don't like. Well, ministers have got to get a grip on it all. And I mean, it's all very well to say, oh, well, it started under the previous Conservative government, but I mean, Jenrick very clearly, if he'd been the minister, would have said no way and had done something about it. And he pointed out...
Well, that depends when.
Well, he pointed out that she had a representative on the body that was signing this all off. So why wasn't she told about it? Or was she told about it?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Why wasn't there an intervention then?
But
and
she
the
couldn't have
truth
been
is
clearer
that
then,
any minister with the
clear.
backing of the cabinet can put a simple piece of legislation to Parliament at any time to stop this kind of thing. And that's, again, something that Robert has proposed to this government.
So that probably now is what's needed. We probably do need a piece of legislation that brings... I mean, this should be under the control of the Lord Chancellor's office, not some spurious body.
And there's going to be a rare outbreak of unity here, but I think that's right. And I think, you know, the language that she deployed and the anger that she genuinely feels about this, I think it shows that she is somebody who's trying to fix things. I don't want to sound like...
Or is the Labour Party realising how much trouble they're in on this
sort of issue? Well, there's a bit of that too. I mean, it's politics.
Yeah, well, we're all cheering for her, but she's the one who can do something. Where's the bill? I mean, the Conservatives wouldn't get in the way of the bill. They're saying, bring us the bill.
Well,
it could be a very short piece of legislation.
It may happen.
That's what we need to see.
Yeah.
I do believe when you're in government, words are not enough. You've got no excuses. You've got an enormous majority. These things are wrong. Fix them. That's why a lot of people voted Labour. They wanted change. They didn't want these independent bodies carrying on behaving as if nothing had changed.
Quick thought on Robert Jenrick. You know, you made the point, if Jenrick had been there, this wouldn't have happened. But we've seen two very different Robert Jenricks in the last 10 years. We've had Robert Generic, as he was known, the sort of Lib Demi, Cameroon, Remainer, and suddenly this Damascene conversion. Is it genuine?
Oh, yes, this is very genuine. Remember, he did resign from the government before it was obviously going to crash and made his points about immigration because he thought the government was getting immigration wrong, as they most visibly were, and he made that public when it wasn't a best career move and when there was a lot of upward mobility because government ministers were going down like flies.
I just wonder out loud how far his journey is going to take him, though. Do we think that he might be the next recruit, Nigel?
Well, I don't know. I tell you what's interesting.
He's in play, though,
I tell you what's
it's
interesting about that is I am absolutely convinced that what Jenrick says in public, actually a majority of Conservative backbenchers would disagree with quite strongly. And it's pretty clear to me, John, that the sort of the one nation Lib Demi element are now very much in the majority of the Conservative Parliamentary Party.
So are you putting
Well,
out the
I'm not
welcome
part of
mat?
it, so I don't
No,
know.
but so you can comment dispassionately, you see, without being disloyal.
Yeah, I would be surprised if that were true. I agree that there is still a very broad spectrum of opinion, but Kemi, as leader, has been absolutely crystal clear that we got migration wrong, which is probably the biggest single mistake that the last government made. And,
Net zero?
and taken that right was, I think she's on her way to a more common sense position on net
But would
zero,
you welcome
yes.
him, Nigel, if he turned up and said, how about it?
To be honest with you,
Is the door open?
I'd welcome anybody that didn't bring their Tory infighting with them. Because, I mean, all political parties have these problems.
We don't like infighting, do we?
Well, all parties have it.
But apparently so, yes.
So don't encourage more, you know. I did actually take the mickey out of Jenrick, because, you know, when he ran for the leadership, and it was like, he sounded like Nigel and everything. And I did say to him, in one of the division lobbies, I could give him coaching if he wants to be me. But there we are. Let's move on to something with the Wembley division. The What the Farage moment. For 6 days in a row now, they've crossed the English Channel. It's about 1,500 over the course of the last week. In fact, we're now at a record number at this stage of the year at any point since this began back very slowly to begin with in 2018. And smash the gangs, it's just, I mean, none of this is going to happen, is it? This will be a complete failure for the Labour government. It'll hurt them almost as much as it hurt the Tories.
The thing we've learned about this is that if there was a single simple thing you could do, let's just put the Navy into the Channel, whatever it is, then the governments would do it. It's about doing all the little things together. You know, taking their phones off them, disrupting the supply of the boats while they're still in France, you know, putting adverts there saying don't come.
None of it works.
Each of these things individually don't work, but collectively we have to turn the whole tide round. And I think, you know, pushing at all these different doors will eventually have an impact.
I don't believe that
but
for a moment.
There's no single way to do it. What's the single answer?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Tony Abbott faced this in Australia. They had exactly the same problem sort of 15, 20 years ago. Everyone said, much the same as Paul's saying, we've got to do this, we've got to do this, we've got to do this. In the end, Abbott did it. It can be done, can't it?
Yes, it can. And, of course, it requires sending people back. That's what has to happen. Or not letting them get here in the first place, where obviously this government, like the last one, is trying to get the French authorities to take a much tougher line to intercept the boats before they leave.
Well, they're saying they'd intercept them in shallow water. So, you know...
Yeah, but why do they get off the beach? And then the argument goes, oh, well, there are a lot of beaches, but then we're giving them a lot of money, so surely one can have better surveillance on the beaches.
Well, that's part of the answer, absolutely.
We've given them, I mean, basically 500 million. In their defence, I will say that the takeoff points stretch over 100 miles. There are vast areas of sand dunes. Why they've got all the sand over there, we've got the shingle, I've never been able to work out. So even if the French police try hard, even if we do all these things, the incentives to come are still just too great.
Yeah, but it's also how you treat people when they arrive illegally in the country.
No, of course. I just repeat the point. I think this is going to hurt the government. Maybe not quite as much as the last government, but it is going to hurt.
But it wasn't just the illegals, it was also the very large number of people who came in legally, many of whom then became illegal.
Oh, sure. Now, I have to read out this comment from the chairman of the Sentencing Council of England and Wales. Lord Justice William Davis said one of the purposes of the revised imposition of community and custodial sentences guideline is to make sure the courts have the most comprehensive information available. The reasons for including groups vary, but include evidence of disparities in sentencing outcomes, disadvantages faced within the criminal justice system, and complexities in circumstances of individual offenders. Sentences are decided by an independent judiciary following sentencing guidelines and taking into account all of the circumstances of the individual offence and the individual offender. So there we are. Let's sort that out. In a moment, let's talk about local government reorganisation. Will it save money? And surely it can't be right that 5.5 million people have been denied their vote on the 1st of May.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tomorrow, I'm afraid to say there is going to be less sunshine around, more cloudy skies, also some showers at times, but still remaining rather warm for the time of year. And it's all because we have low pressure moving in from the Atlantic, dragging in some frontal systems, so some more cloud and some outbreaks of rain. And we'll see that change as we head through into this evening. So much of northern England, parts of Wales and the southwest will see quite a lot of low cloud, so some murky conditions at times, some outbreaks of of rain, but still staying relatively clear across parts of the southeast and then later on across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So turning a little bit chillier here with some patchy frost, but most towns and cities seeing a milder night if you compare it to recent nights. Then across Scotland, first thing, there's going to be a few clearer skies, still feeling chilly, largely dry, though we can't rule out a few showers just skirting the far north. And similar across Northern Ireland, brighter, perhaps with a bit more cloud across eastern areas. But for northern parts of England, parts of Wales and also the southwest, a lot of low clouds, so a murky start and quite damp at times with some outbreaks of rain. But East Anglia, Sussex and Kent likely to see a bright but chilly start to the day. Now we are going to see those cloudy skies continuing across much of the country. Still some outbreaks of rain at times. The best of the brightness still across parts of the southeast and then later on across parts of Scotland. So that's where we should see some sunshine. But for many, it is going to be a much cloudier day, but still feeling warm. Temperatures still widely above average, so highs of 15, possibly even 16 Celsius across the southeast. Then through on to Saturday, there'll be some cloud and some wet weather to start across Scotland, parts of the southwest. But through the course of the day, we'll see high pressure building back in. So once again, lots of dry weather around and lots of sunshine too. And temperatures still above average for the time of year, so still feeling pleasant. As we head into next week, more dry weather, more sunshine, but we'll see temperatures dip away. So some cold days and some cold nights ahead.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
County council elections, last contested in 2021, have been cancelled for this year. In fact, some rumours say they could be cancelled for up to 3 years. In Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Thurrock, East Sussex, West Sussex, Hampshire, Isle of Wight and Surrey. That is 5.5 million people that have been denied their vote. But it's all OK, because Norfolk County Council have come out with a report that says if you get rid of two-tier, yes, we're back to two-tier, if we get rid of district councils and county councils and just have one great big super unitary, or even if we divide the country up into blocks of 500,000, that somehow it's all going to work wonderfully and it's going to save quite a lot of taxpayers' money. Well, I remain to be pretty unconvinced, but it seems that both the Labour and Conservative parties are happy to deny people a vote that I think they deserve. I'm joined down the line by Councillor Phil Broadhead, Chairman of the Conservative Councillors Association and Bournemouth Councillor. So, Phil, let's get this right. People on county councils that got elected at a completely different stage of the electoral cycle just keep their jobs for this year and maybe up to 3 years, and we should all say that's fine.
Well, no, I think many of us don't think it's fine, actually. And I know that our MPs in Parliament are going to be voting against this plan. I think we need to be really clear what this is. This is the Labour government's imposition. I'm actually in Manchester today, and we heard the minister that's shepherding this, Jim McMahon, talk to us all quite happy about the whole thing, calling it localism in action. This is not localism. This is the government telling local areas what to do and actually putting a gun to the head of many local leaders. They've said that this is non-negotiable, and if you don't get on board with it, then they're going to do it to you anyway.
Phil, I don't buy that at all. We've had the Conservative leaders of councils saying, please, sir, can you make sure we don't have a vote because we're all going to lose our seats? That's what it's really all about, isn't it?
Not at all. No, I mean, you'll have seen the white paper like I have, Nigel, and it's pretty clear in there that the government has said they're going to do this anyway. You'll get some extras if you come along board early and, be on that priority programme. And they made council leaders say that they had to ask for the elections to be cancelled. There was no real choice in this. Now, I think there could be an argument that local government reorganisation could work in some areas, but it's always previously been a choice. It's been locally led. And the problem this time is the government's made it clear you've got to get on board or they're going to do it to you. And it's just not fair.
All right, fair enough. Thank you for giving us your point of view. I'm not sure that I buy it, but there we are. It seemed to be very convenient, you know, that, oh, well, we can, you know, keep our positions on, you know, whether it's on sort of chairing a committee or whatever it is. Interesting, I spoke on the phone to Sir Bob Russell, Lib Dem Member of Parliament for Colchester, and one of those politicians who's long enough in the tooth to remember the last big local government reorganisation, almost exactly 50 years ago. And the point Bob made was that actually having elections during the period was rather useful because you were able to debate what those changes might be. And I just put it to you, I think the whole thing's a dog's dinner. I think what it does, it's likely to break down a sense of county identities if there are several unitaries. They then want to put a mayor over the top. No one's been asked. No one's been consulted.
Well, hang on. There is a consultation going on where everyone is being asked. I live in Sussex. It may reunify the ancient county of Sussex, and you'd have a mayor for Sussex in charge of that.
In charge of how many unitaries?
Well, I think that's open for discussion.
Yeah,
I mean, I would put myself forward to be the mayor of Sussex.
Would you?
What a great job. You know, I think that would be a really interesting new thing. And our constitution is constantly evolving. This is just another stage of that.
It's called devolution.
Yeah.
Right? But you have around the country quite a lot of small district councils that represent relatively rural
you could still
areas.
Have town councils and parish councils. You could still have that very local representation. But, you know, the
point if they get swallowed up into a bigger unitary that's dominated by a city, I worry about the little villages, I worry about the small towns.
Well, it's a fair point.
And actually, the power's not going down, it's going up in that case.
But it will save money too. I mean, that's the other thing. There's a lot of duplication. A lot of people don't know they live in a sort of two-tier district and county
It didn't save at any time it was done before. If only it did, but the taxes always went up, they never went down.
John, what do you think about these plans?
Well, I think they're dreadful. They are top-down. In a lot of places they won't be wanted. I think it is probably a bogus consultation. I don't mind local communities deciding they want a different set of arrangements. That's happened in the past, and sometimes it's been better. It doesn't lead to big savings, unfortunately. There are a lot of costs of change, and the main programmes still get more expensive. But it's absolutely wrong. You've been perfectly correct on this, to cancel the elections. There is no excuse for cancelling the elections. I'm glad to hear that Conservative MPs are now of the same view. I don't know whether all Conservative councillors have been of the same view, but I think that the Conservative Party needs to side with you and your colleagues in saying this is completely wrong, denial of democracy, and it just doubles up the damage that is being done by not having a proper consultation and not listening to local areas over what they want.
There is a consultation. Actually, going ahead with the elections would waste an awful lot of money, and we don't have the money.
When people talk about consultations, you know, it's tucked away somewhere on a website. The great, 95% of people living in these areas wouldn't have a blooming clue there's a consultation going on. They're not really consultations, are they?
But it is open to anyone. And let's face it, some of the county council turnouts are pretty low as well. It's not that there's an enormous demand for these elections. People are very, very upset by elections they didn't even know were going to happen. But, delaying it by a year is not democracy denied. It's just deferred. And it will save an awful lot of money.
How much is it actually going to save? Give us some actual numbers. How much would the tax go down?
Funnily enough, John, I don't know.
So Norfolk say, hang on,
because it won't.
It will.
Norfolk have put together this report, which says that within the county of Norfolk, one large authority, I guess it's a relatively small population, so it won't be divided up into several. One large authority will save £29 million. There you are. Do you believe that, John?
No.
You're so cynical. What's the matter with you?
Well, because it never has in the past. Will the overhead, after they've gone through all the costs of change, be lower to start with? Well, it could be, but you still need councillors who will provide that discipline. Because if you have a bigger council, what they do is they appoint more grander people on higher salaries. So you don't get all the big savings.
It's a bit daft, isn't it, though? Where we live, the one council does your bins, but another council does the recycling. I mean, that's just a silly bit of duplication, isn't it?
There's a perfectly good case for unitaries, but don't missell them again, because they never in the past led to lower taxes. And there is this temptation, which councillors have got to control, to have much more grand architecture.
But I quite
in
like
a bigger
the idea.
council.
I like the historic counties re-emerging, like Sussex.
Well, if that was to happen, I might agree with you. I guess the other counter-argument that is interesting is, mayors are becoming a bigger feature of our life. And whether that's good or bad, Andy Burnham is a significant figure.
He has an impact.
Ben Houchin, Andy Street. These have been quite big figures in our national debate. Is there a possibility, John, that having a mayor for Sussex or whatever it is, that might actually be a good thing?
No, I think it's usually a bad thing, and particularly the Labour mayors had a long habit of just grandstanding against the government. So they wanted to be responsible for all the things the government did, and they made a really bad job of running the things they actually had authority over.
That's not fair in
just look at
Manchester,
London.
actually.
It's been a disaster from this point of view. Wouldn't sort out crime, for which the mayor is responsible. Wouldn't sort out the transport and run it efficiently at a sensible price.
But hey, they voted for
always
it.
grandstanding on the national issues.
But they voted for it.
And Boris was mayor for a lot of that.
A few did. It wasn't a very big turnout.
So how do we reinvigorate? Right, last thought on this. Can we reinvigorate local democracy?
Yes, and the answer is more democracy. So having these devolved big assemblies, I think, will reinvigorate the whole debate and get more people voting, which is what we all want.
What we need is councillors who are good, who are empowered, who accept responsibility instead of every time something goes wrong saying it's all the fault of the national government and they didn't send us enough cash. They infantilise themselves by always blaming the government.
It's a difficult one. I have to say, though, I think it would have been good to have these elections.
Well, we
in
all
these
love
councils.
an election, don't we?
No,
but
actually, I think local government reorganisation could have been part of the debate that was put by candidates, and then actually the public would be genuinely consulted, have a vote on things. I'd have thought that to be much, much more
I agree with that. And do you think the government would actually accept a group of people responding to the consultation in one area saying we don't want this?
Well, if there's an overwhelming view locally, of course, that's what a consultation is for.
Well, let's wait and see.
Right. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining me on the programme. I am joined in the studio by Professor Matt Goodwin. Matt, you seem very excited about your programme tonight, so tell us more.
Nigel, we've got a great show tonight. We're looking at, are we now officially in two-tier Britain? We've got Ayaan Hirsi Ali, big writer, big voice on the so-called culture wars. We've got Suella Braverman joining us as well. We're then heading over to the US. We've got Michael Schellenberger, you'll remember, he broke the Twitter files. He's going to be talking to us about what is going on in Team Trump, but also where do the Democrats go next. And then lastly, as the BBC ran this utterly bizarre story, you might have seen it, about the contribution of mass migration to the NHS, came out of nowhere, nobody knew why this was news. I'm going to be talking to a top surgeon in the NHS about migration, who also happens to be my uncle. That's the state of the nation.
Talk about an inside job. Goodness gracious me. Well, it's OK. Jacob used to get his sister on. It's allowed. Right, we're done for the evening. Let's have a look before Matt's show at the all-important weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tomorrow, I'm afraid to say there is going to be less sunshine around, more cloudy skies, also some showers at times, but still remaining rather warm for the time of year. And it's all because we have low pressure moving in from the Atlantic, dragging in some frontal systems, so some more cloud and some outbreaks of rain. And we'll see that change as we head through into this evening. So much of northern England, parts of Wales and the southwest will see quite a lot of low cloud, so some murky conditions at times, some outbreaks of rain, but still staying relatively clear across parts of the southeast and then later on across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So turning a little bit chillier here with some patchy frost, but most towns and cities seeing a milder night if you compare it to recent nights. Then across Scotland, first thing, there's going to be a few clearer skies, still feeling chilly, largely dry, though we can't rule out a few showers just skirting the far north. And similar across Northern Ireland, brighter, perhaps with a bit more cloud across eastern areas. But for northern parts of England, parts of Wales and also the southwest, a lot of low clouds, so a murky start and quite damp at times with some outbreaks of rain. But East Anglia, Sussex and Kent likely to see a bright but chilly start to the day. Now we are going to see those cloudy skies continuing across much of the country. Still some outbreaks of rain at times. The best of the brightness still across parts of the southeast and then later on across parts of Scotland. So that's where we should see some sunshine. But for many, it is going to be a much cloudier day, but still feeling warm. Temperatures still widely above average. So highs of 15, possibly even 16 Celsius across the southeast. Then through onto Saturday, there'll be some cloud and some wet weather to start across Scotland, parts of the southwest. But through the course of the day, we'll see high pressure building back in. So once again, lots of dry weather around and lots of sunshine too. And temperatures still above average for the time of year, so still feeling pleasant. As we head into next week, more dry weather, more sunshine, but we'll see temperatures dip away. So some cold days and some cold nights ahead.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry,